we are the second largest gold producer in Africa. Most of that gold is smuggled to UAE.
More than 13 million people have been internally displaced. The humanitarian cost has been huge.
The RSF is not fighting the army, it's fighting the people. And some of them were buried alive. They were being asked to dig their own graves, mass graves.
But the RSF and the Sudanese forces have bombed indiscriminately at times, have used starvation as a weapon of war. What is the Sudanese government's response to these accusations?
انتوا الشبابيك قافلة كلها ولا ايه؟
Can you see me?
Yes. Okay. Great. Let's go. Hi, good day, and welcome to another episode of Unapologetic. I'm very pleased today to be with Sudanese Ambassador Babiker. Good to have you with us.
It's my pleasure, and thank you very much for having me.
Thank you. We're going to be speaking quite a bit today. We're going to be speaking, obviously, the main topic of discussion is the Sudanese government taking the UAE to the ICJ for genocide. But we're also going to be speaking about the origins of the Sudanese conflict, atrocities by the RSF. We'll also ask questions about the actions of the Sudanese Armed Forces and try to give our audience an understanding about what's going on with the conflict, the challenges around the conflict, the role of international actors and everything else. So thank you for your time.
Yes, pleasure.
Just to begin with, can you tell me and tell the audience what's the case about? What evidence does Sudan have against the UAE of the involvement in the genocide, and what's the crux of the case about?
Thank you very much. Actually, I think the entire world now is aware of the huge body of evidence that is linking UAE directly to the atrocities that the RSF is perpetrating in Sudan. To the extent that RSF, for many observers, for the Sudanese people, for many regional and international observers, is a proxy paramilitary acting on behalf of the UAE. And had it not for the UAE uninterrupted supplies of weapons, heavy weapons, sophisticated weapons, strategic drone, mercenaries, this war could have not continued that long.
Can you go a bit into the actual evidence? You say that the world is aware of the evidence, but there may be viewers who aren't unfamiliar. Can you speak about what evidence specifically you put forth and what exactly are the main allegations against the UAE?
Of course, since actually the year 2023, when the war erupted on the 15th of April 2023, in few months' time, it became evident that the RSF is receiving heavy weapons, continuous supplies of weapons, and finger of accusation directed to the UAE, given the special relationship between the RSF leadership and the UAE government. And by end of that year, the Security Council panel of independent experts who are actually appointed by the Security Council while the UAE was a member in the council, prepared a report detailing the routes of the delivery or the of weapons by the UAE to the RSF, and gave a very clear picture about the number of the flights, the airports that are used to receive the weapons, and he discussed the report discussed that in details and came to conclusion that there is credible evidence that UAE is actually arming RSF. And since then, the international investigative media gave a lot of details, starting from the New York Times, Washington Post, Wall Street Journal, CNN, and the likes. In addition, many international human rights organizations, reputable human rights organizations like Amnesty International, Human Rights Watch, and other specialized organizations also gave detailed report about this. So it became, since the beginning of the year 2024, it became well known for everybody that the UAE is the power behind RSF.
We're going to speak a bit about the UAE's motivations and why they would do that, and we'll speak about the RSF as well. But before we do that, let's just give a sense. What's the Sudanese government's perspective on how this war began?
Actually, the Sudanese government and our national army have done their best to avoid this scenario, because following the revolution in 2019, after the removal of the al-Bashir regime, the country was emerging from multiple conflicts, and there were different or several armed movements. Some of them were fighting the government of Omar al-Bashir, and for the RSF was used by that government against this armed movement. So it was so that as the country emerging from this multiple conflict, it is wise to try to bring all this armed movement together and to try to integrate them into the national army within very specific procedures and terms, and so that the country can usher into a new era of national consensus and national unity. And the main contention point that was the RSF wanted this to be done at rather very long period for the national army and for all those objective military experts, that this process should take place between 2 to 3 years to integrate all armed movement, because having many armies in one country is a recipe for chaos, for instability, for war like what happening now. And the RSF was emboldened actually by the support, the external support that it was getting. So they were adamant to no, they don't want to be integrated within 2 to 3 years. They rather wanted to continue as like a separate independent army for 10 to 15 years, while they are having a huge or building a huge economic empire and having their own political arrangements. So that was not couldn't be accepted by anybody, because this just throwing the country into case of the scenario that we have seen in the Middle East for some countries that is run by militias, by the national army no longer has the monopoly of using arms, as in the modern states. In modern states, or the government, it's one of the definitions that is the authorized body to use violence or to use armed violence. So if you have many militias, many armed movements that working independently and parallel to the national army, that is the beginning of war. And that's what happened actually.
Let's talk about the RSF and the Sudanese forces and the war between them. I want to go and I want you to kind of detail some of and give us a sense of the atrocities that it's been well cited by human rights organizations, by very media. There's also been human rights organizations who cited, I will say, much lesser atrocities, and atrocity is still an atrocity by the Sudanese forces. We'll speak about that in a bit. But before that, what sort of are the origins? Give us a sense of who the RSF are. Why they exist, why they are such a... I mean, you do say that they have a lot of support now from the UAE, but they've been around for a long time. What are their origins?
Their origin, of course, it is known. It is Janjaweed. And Janjaweed, now, if you consult any dictionary, you will find the word Janjaweed is there, because Janjaweed is this militia from some Darfurian communities.
This goes back to early 2000, right?
Yeah. Like more than 20 years ago, who were very active there, and from nomadic communities. Not all of them, of course, part of that, but they were notorious for the atrocities that they have been doing in Darfur in early 2000s, and they were used at the time by the al-Siddig regime to quell the Darfurian armed movement, what we call the armed struggle movement. So, and they have been in existence for quite a long time actually, because their nature, their lifestyle is like that. Some of them, they use weapons of the way to get their living actually. And maybe even the late Libyan leader, Muammar Gaddafi, used them also in 1980s to fight against Chad. So there is a long history. I don't want to get into that, but that's their origin. And just they renamed themselves, but basically they are the same Janjaweed.
So I mean, the crux of the argument against the UAE is they've armed the RSF, and so they've prolonged this war and have sort of enabled the atrocities that the RSF have committed. We're going to speak about the atrocities, but before that, what do you think is the motivations? Why would the UAE support the RSF?
There is no history of hostility, and during the era of Sheikh Zayed, the relation between Sudan and the UAE were very good, very good, and there is always close relationship between the leadership in the two countries. Out of the blue, the Sudanese people find themselves killed and their women raped and the property is looted and all this sort of atrocity taking place with direct involvement, direct complicity of the UAE. And many people, what is it for? What is the reason? What we Sudanese people have done to the UAE and there is a deep feeling of betrayal, deep feeling of ingratitude by the Sudanese people, because this is the very people we help to establish their army, to establish their educational system, administrative system. They rewarded us that way. So the question should be directed for them. But for me, I'm just trying to analyze. I think UAE has interest or greed actually to control Sudan wealth, in mineral wealth, the huge arable land that are not cultivated yet, our long coast on the Red Sea. And they don't want to do that because Sudan was always ready for investment, for this kind of, because direct foreign investment. And we are ready to do it in the normal manner, like win-win formula, like business is business. But they don't want to do it that way. They want to control. And secondly, I think also, this might explain, that they need RSF to act like a proxy for them, to keep it and to maintain it and to develop it and to enable it to be like, to use it as a military muscle, because they think they are in competition with other regional powers, and being a rather small country with very small army, they need a proxy paramilitary that they use, and they did use it before in their foreign adventions or external adventions. And thirdly, it might also have something to do with the way they perceive what happened, the revolution in Sudan. This model of people revolted against dictatorship and remove it, and managed to remove it, is a threatening example for them, because they don't want this model to succeed, because if it succeeds, that a revolution, a popular revolution, succeed in removing dictatorship and establishing a stable democracy, is a threat for them. Maybe that.
Okay, so you've said it's basically three things. It's they're interested in the resources. Can you give us an idea of what that is? I know there's a lot of gold, but is there anything else? And then I'm interested in the idea of they want a proxy army, right? And you've mentioned that they've used the RSF in a few other conflicts. Again, tell us some of what the examples of those conflicts. And then I understand that they don't want to see popular uprisings, but just let's speak more about the gold and the resources. And also, give me some examples of when the RSF was unleashed as sort of a mercenary force by the UAE against actors outside of Sudan.
I think for the last part of the question, it is known. I don't want to, I don't have to name the countries. Everybody knows them. The gold, yes, now UAE is one of the main exporter of gold. While there is no gold mine, there is no gold mine in UAE, because most of our, we are the second largest gold producer in Africa. Sometime, maybe even during the war, we produced like 60 tons of gold, or maybe sometime even during the peacetime, up to 100 tons. Most of that gold is smuggled to UAE with help. Of course, after the revolution and during the last days of Omar al-Bashir and after the revolution, RSF took control of the bigger chunk of our gold wealth, in a legitimate way, but they help smuggling the bigger part of our gold, and it is basically smuggled to Dubai. And it is there was a study by Chatham House on that, and you can see it. Also, they are interested in they have, for me, unexplained interest in the Red Sea, in acquiring ports along the Red Sea. They have been in Somalia, Somaliland, Djibouti, elsewhere, and they were interested to have a control or to own the Red Sea. I don't know for what reason, because they are not literal country on the Red Sea. They have their own ports. They have a very, important geopolitical location. They are not in short of ports. So, but once again, it is better to ask them. Not because we are at the receiving end. We are not aggressor. We didn't start this war.
Can you give me a sense of the reported atrocities that RSF have committed? Sudanese in Sudan, since the start of the war, at various times, more than 13 million people have been internally displaced. The humanitarian cost has been huge. Give me a sense of just what's your sense, what the Sudanese government sense is of the atrocities committed by the RSF.
It is not actually the sense of the Sudanese government, it is the sense of the people. Because it is very hard, it is hardly that you find a Sudanese family that was not subjected in a way or another by these atrocities, by the RSF atrocities. For example, in Khartoum is the home. Khartoum is our capital, national capital. Is the home for like 10 million people, representing almost a quarter of our national population. The majority of these people have been expelled from their homes, and many of them have been subjected to killing. Ladies who have been raped. All the people belonging the property, the car, the vehicles, everything have been looted, and for nothing. The RSF, to the extent that I can say that the RSF is not fighting the army; it's fighting the people. So the atrocities are there. But one of the most, heinous atrocities was what happened in West Darfur, the state of West Darfur, Al-Jinin and its surrounding, where the Masalit African communities has been subjected to a straight away genocide, because in a few weeks' time, 10 to 15,000 civilians were killed, including infants, not just children, children that 1 year or 2 years old. And some of them were buried alive. They were being asked to dig their own graves, mass graves, and to be buried while they are still alive. More than 50 villages were burned out. And in Al Jazeera, for example, Al Jazeera, Central Sudan, more than 20 or 20 something massacres took place in remote villages, small villages. You know, Al Jazeera like an extended farming community, because Al Jazeera used to be the biggest farm in the world, run by under one administration. The total area of Al Jazeera scheme, Al Jazeera farm, is bigger than the Netherlands, other country. So it is a big, huge farming communities. You have small villages scattered, and there are few small towns, and these are basically our farmers and workers, and they don't. There is no any presence for the Sudanese army there, and even in many cases there is even no police centers. But nevertheless, these villages, these small towns were invaded, and massacres took place. In one of these massacres, like 500 people or 400 to 500 people killed in one small town, and for other 100, sometimes the village, the population of the village is not more than 1,000. So dozens of them were killed just to force the people to leave. It was a part of, for me, it is like a settler project or colonizer project. They wanted to depopulate these areas, to replace them with settlers from their own communities within and outside Sudan.
So, I mean, just to highlight that the atrocity you speak of, it's not just murdering. There's been well documents of mass rape, sexual violence, all these kind of things. There is also credible reports from Amnesty International and from the World Food Programme that both sides, not to the same extent, and I'll put that out there, but the RSF and the Sudanese forces have bombed indiscriminately at times, have used starvation as a weapon of war. What is the Sudanese government's response to these accusations?
Of course, for a government representing the people, and for our national army has been in existence for 100 years. And it is a reflection of our national diversity. Every community of every ethnic group, every tribes are represented in our national army. And at all levels, all hierarchy, from the higher leadership up to the foot soldiers. So there is no way that the national army targeting a specific community or targeting a specific ethnic group. And in fact, the existence of the RSF itself is a testimony that this is a national professional army. Because why, for example, the regime of Omar al-Bashir resorted to using RSF? Because the national army, being a national army, being a professional army with deep military traditions and discipline, he couldn't use it to fight against the armed struggle movement represented specific African communities, because you have from the same communities that they have to fight. They are inside within the national army. That's why he used RSF, because these they don't have any limitations. They don't have any discipline. So this accusation, in principle, I deny that there is no any basis for that. The national army, in a systematic or intentional way, commit this kind of things. Secondly, when it comes to the food, the delivery of food assistance, actually, it is known now where the access or that all areas under Sudanese Armed Forces, there is a full access for delivery of food. And one of even the UAE representative put it like 97% access, compared to 27% access for those areas under RSF. And even the people actually have voted for who are their savior by moving whenever they hear or gather that the RSF is coming or intended to invade that, they just leave to the areas where SAF is existing. And following the liberating Khartoum and Jazeera and White Nile, this advances by our national army, there has been a huge return by internally displaced persons and as well as refugees. Maybe something around 5 million people are returning back home because now they feel safe under the RSF, under the national army, SAF. But having said this, of course, in war, you might expect what is called collateral damage or collateral casualties, and you can't guarantee that everything is going according to the plan, because sometimes mistakes happen here and there. But lastly, just compare after Khartoum now deliberate. Compare Khartoum. Khartoum is a modern city with very high building, with a lot of. Compare Khartoum, the state of Khartoum now to what happened in Gaza or what happened even in Beirut. Khartoum was under RSF for 2 years, and the Sudanese army has air force, and they could have used it the same way Israel, for example, was using it in Gaza or in southern Lebanon. You see the magnitude of destruction there and in Khartoum. Khartoum, the high buildings that were always used by RSF for snipers, for heavy artillery, were still, all of them are intact. What happened? I mean, maybe the glasses, the windows, the facade of the affected, but the buildings themselves were intact, were not affected. And the reason that even this celebration of Khartoum and some sort of delayed, because the national army was very carefully putting protection of the civilian and minimizing the casualties among civilians as a top priority. Otherwise, this war could have ended in few weeks, because the army has the air force, which is decisively can intervene, as we have seen in Libya, for example, by NATO, in Israel. But always the air force had the final say, maybe, or the most crucial say in deciding the fate of this kind of military confrontation.
You've mentioned a few times that the Sudanese forces are representative and they're representative of the people, and I can definitely see, we see from the pictures, you see the celebrations that people are coming in, etc. That when Khartoum was recaptured, people were joyous that refugees are returning. But I mean, it hasn't been elected, right? So I mean, there's still, I guess, that the priority is still to quell a war. But what are the plans to sort of transition towards a more representative, formally representative, democratic country?
Of course, we have long experience in that. You know, Sudanese people were one of the first, if not the first ever people to remove a military government. That was more than 60 years ago, in October 1964, when they revolted against the first military government, and they removed it within few days through protest and strikes. And we have become like a pattern that there will be a transitional government overseen by the military, because they are the military who are always siding with the people. And within there will be always like a transitional period for 1 year or 2 years, and after that a general election takes place. That happened in 1964 and once again in 1985, and it should have taken place this time around had it not for the external meddling. This is the difference, because in the past it was only the Sudanese people, it was only the Sudanese political power, Sudanese military, but this time around there's a lot of external meddling, taking advantage of the precarious transition that Sudan was emerging from multiple conflicts, from international isolation, facing formidable economic challenges, economic crisis, and in addition to so divided political structure or political elite, political parties. So this delayed or interrupted the process. It should have, I mean, by now we should have taken, general election should have taken place. But of course you can't expect under the war that general election can take place. But again, the military, the leadership of the Sudanese Armed Forces always make it very clear that they have no intention to stay in power. What all they want to end this war, with ending the threat by the RSF, to defeat the RSF and to end its threat to the sovereignty, the stability, the very existence, the survival of Sudan, and to stabilize it. And after that, they will work for general election. And they actually, there is a roadmap which was proposed by the group, political grouping, political coalition, and it was presented to the head of state, and they adopted that after the end of the war, there will be a nationwide or all-inclusive political dialogue to chart the way forward. But there is an agreement that this process should be culminated with having fair and free general election.
What do you make of international efforts to sort of mediate on the conflict? I mean, recently there was a London conference and the Sudanese government wasn't invited. So what do you make of the international community's efforts? But also, do you feel that they've been adequate in sort of partnering with the Sudanese government to stabilize the situation?
Before you come, I mean, help resolving a problem, you need to have the right comprehension, or you need to understand it properly. The problem is that there is a narrative or a false narrative or false diagnosis of the crisis. Many international actors, many in the media, tend to this very simplistic approach. That is, this is a power struggle between two generals. Let us bring them together and strike a deal between them, and khalas. That is the solution. And that is, nothing is far from the truth like this. I think the international community should view this the same way, or deal with this the same way it dealt with ISIS problem in Middle East, and with the Shabab, for example, in Somalia, and even Boko Haram in West Africa, because you have a paramilitary group, transboundary paramilitary group that compose a large number of foreign mercenaries threatening the sovereignty, the territorial integrity of the Sudan, of the statehood of Sudan. In such a situation, you don't talk about mediation. You can't mediate, you can't compromise, we can't compromise our sovereignty, we can't compromise our statehood, state order, we can't compromise our territorial integrity as a way for peace, because that means you are passing a verdict to split the country. So we expect the international community to stand with us to maintain our sovereignty, to maintain our to existence as sovereign state, and the state order, the national institution. That is the support we need. But and if there is a mediation, or just to convince those who are behind this terrorist group to stop their meddling or fueling of the war. That is the only avenue for mediation. Otherwise, if you deal with this paramilitary, this terrorist group, as in a sort or unequal to the government or the national army, and we want to make a mediation between them, that is not the right approach at all. If there is any effort, let it direct it to the sponsor, what we call the sponsor of this RSF.
You've mentioned that there's this narrative in the international powers that this is a power struggle between two generals, and this was your response to why the Sudanese government is sort of not in the talks, in these mediation talks. Do you think that's the case? It's a narrative, or do you think there's something sinister at play? Do you think there's an effort and there's initiative to kind of destabilize and question the integrity of Sudan's borders?
First, let me explain that the government of Sudan was ready actually to negotiate, and since the beginning of the war, the first weeks of the war, there has been a mediation between that was supervised or by the Saudi Arabia and USA, and it resulted what we call the Jeddah Declaration. The Jeddah Declaration, which was signed on the 11th of May 2023. And it was based on the international humanitarian law, and actually aimed to differentiate between the military objective and civilian objective, and that the RSF should evacuate all the houses of the ordinary people or on all civilian sites like hospital, universities, mosques, and that they should prepare for negotiation for permanent ceasefire. And that was a sort of a roadmap for peaceful settlement of the crisis. But it became evident that RSF was not just signed that declaration to give itself a chance to reposition its forces, and instead of implementing the obligation that was included in the declaration, it used the same declaration and the humanitarian truce that was declared after the signing of that declaration to actually to acquire and to invade and to seize more homes of ordinary people, and to invade new areas, and that the worst atrocities took place after signing. The worst atrocities against civilians actually took place after signing this declaration, which was in Al-Jinena. That the declaration was signed in May 2023, and the genocide in West Darfur took place in June, just few weeks. So this made it very clear for us that RSF are not for peace. They are part of that. May be the answer. They are a part of a project to dismantle the state order in Sudan, and maybe to remap it. There was a project for sometimes they talk about creating a national home for their for specific communities, what they call them sometimes the diaspora Arabs from the Sahel countries. Those people, some nomadic communities, some of their leaders do not even believe in the national state. They want their own home, national home, based on their tribal identity, not for national identity. And they were all talking about that openly, that because they have been nomads, they have been crisscrossing the region, they don't recognize even the international borders. So they thought having this military force and having very huge economic resources and being backed by a wealthy country and external players, even not only UAE or others, that it is their time to have to create their national home or national state. National in the sense that it is based on tribalism, not only the multi-ethnic, multicultural national state. So in that sense, yes, it is not only, I mean, maybe there are some external actors having interest in having chaos and instability in the country.
So you said, I mean, it's clear that one of them you've identified as the UAE. Who else do you think are actors who want to see Sudan sort of disintegrated?
I mean, we have, if you look into the region, we have models in the region. For example, for DRC, for example, DRC is a very huge country with very rich resources in everything. But because there are many external players who are interested in the wealth of these countries, they don't want a stable, united, strong government there or strong state there. So maybe the same approach here. For many external players, they don't want a united, strong, very stable country in Sudan, very stable state in Sudan, because such a scenario will make it easier for them to exploit the wealth of the country, to exploit and to make use of the very important geopolitical and geostrategic location of the country. That might be the case in our Carim.
I've got two more questions and then we'll be done. I know it's been a long time and thank you for your time. Egypt has sort of been, supportive mildly of the Sudanese government, and UAE and Egypt are traditionally allies. Do you see this war sort of creating some sort of fragmentation between that?
Okay, for Egypt, of course, Egypt and Sudan are closely linked with historical, with social, cultural ties, and there is a lot of interdependence between Sudan and Egypt when it comes to security, economics, and everything. And in a sense that Sudan security and stability matter very much for Egypt and vice versa, because in the past since all history, ancient history, we were very close to each other. So, and Egypt's position is in support of the national institution of Sudan and of the sovereignty of Sudan, of stability in Sudan, and they are doing whatever they can to help that, because at the end of the day, if there is instability in Sudan, or if there is chaos and a stateless situation in Sudan, Egypt will be affected by that, of course, and be satisfied by the position. But for the UAE, as I said earlier, I don't know what is the motivation. I mean, traditionally, they don't have any role in Sudan, and even for Sudan is very big country, it's very ancient country. We were in existence as a modern Sudan for at least 200 years, known as Sudan since maybe the invasion of Muhammad Ali in 1820 something, 25, 20, yeah, exactly. So Sudan became a united state. So, and we have, let alone the 5,000 history of our ancient civilization. So for such a country to be, I mean, for a small country like UAE, or for a rather very new, I mean, we respect actually the Emirati people, we respect the Emirate as a state, but some of their leaders, the way they are thinking is not that rational, and they put themselves in a comparison with a rather bigger states, and it doesn't make any sense for such a country to try to meddle in the internal affairs of Sudan, and they don't have anything to do with the internal affairs of the domestic politics, the internal politics of Sudan.
Final question. What's your, I mean, you are the representative of the government, even though you are in the UK. What's your message to the Sudanese people and to, external actors?
Okay, for the Sudanese people, I'm saying that I'm very proud of being Sudanese. I'm very proud of my people, that the people have, been very courageous, very resilient, very steadfast in the face of this, what I can describe as external conspiracy to dismantle the national state, and at a time the international community appears to have let them down, and even the institution of the maybe something like the Security Council or wouldn't want to exercise their responsibility in maintaining the international order by taking a decisive position on the external actors that who are fueling the war. And let me say that this war could have ended at least a year ago if the Security Council acted in a responsible way. When we table our complaint against the UAE intervention, after the report that I referred to earlier by the security panel of experts, indicate who are fueling the war. And the Security Council could have acted in a more decisive way to stop that, and that must have led to the, if that happened, it could have led to the end of the war. That was in March and April last year. But this complaint was never discussed by the Security Council. And the Security Council, after even it was put on the agenda, the official agenda of the Security Council for a specific date, somebody intervened to change that. And that is indicated that the international community, or let us say the Western international players, were not very serious to help ending the war in Sudan. Otherwise, they could have acted in a different way that would help ending the war. So my message for the Sudanese people that you have done very good. You have defended your homeland in a very admirable way. At a time, the international community was not very keen to, or very much interested in helping you. And this war have educated us that we are living in a self-assisted or self-help international order, and you have always be ready. You should always be prepared to defend yourself and to depend on yourself and self-reliance. And this, after this war, will emerge a stronger nation, a more united nation, a more, determined nation to rebuild our country.
Ambassador Babiker, thank you so much for your time.